Hey, I'm Amanda Perez with the Early Head Start National Resource Center, and welcome again to Early Essentials. In this webisode, we're going to talk about the incredible growth and change that happens for kids during the first 3 years of life. I'm here in a socialization space for an Early Head Start home-based program. Because this space serves children anywhere from birth to 3 years old and their families, it gives us lots to think about as we consider all that change and growth. But let's hear from staff first. We asked Rashonda, an Early Head Start supervisor, what she thinks new staff working with infants and toddlers should know, and this is what she told us.
What is important, whether you have a prenatal mom or a mom with a 2-year-old, I think is the stages of development, child development. What happens when the baby's in the womb up until the time where the baby comes out. I think that's very, very important.
So Rashonda reminds us that knowing those developmental stages is crucial, really, to this work. We can't cover all of development today, but I think we can get you excited about what's happening in infancy and toddlerhood. This afternoon, I'm talking with Ross Thompson, a professor from the University of California, Davis. He's really focused his work on understanding and helping us understand and get excited about these critical early years. Hey Ross, thank you so much for being here. I'm just thrilled. And I'm wondering if you can tell us, what is it about these first 3 years that is so critical?
Well, what's critical is that it's a period of absolutely exciting growth. I mean, you can just turn around and the children that you're working with, the babies, the toddlers, are changing every day. And so it's a tremendously important time for the experiences that these children are having with the people around them, because this is also a period of great vulnerability. It's a period in which things can go wrong, in which the secure, supportive, helpful presence of other people makes all the difference in helping children get launched into a future of opportunity.
So we asked some providers to send in some questions for us, and I wanted to share with you one that came in. Here's our first question.
I've worked in preschool, and now I'm working with infants and toddlers. They are so different. Sometimes I wonder, am I helping these children learn at all?
So Ross, I think you spoke a little bit to this, but how would you respond to this, caregiver?
Well, I think one of the things that is so obvious and yet can be hidden about infants and toddlers is how active their minds are, how they're continuously trying to figure things out. And we can sometimes miss this if we're not careful. We have to pay attention because they're thinking all the time. I mean, let me give you an example. There was an experiment once where the adult had brought out in front of an 18-month-old sitting on his mother's lap a cup, and he brought out a bunch of beads. And he tried to drop the beads in the cup, and they fell off to the right. And then he tried a second time, and they fell off to the left. And then he tried a third time, and they fell off to the back. And the experimenter then handed or pushed the cup over in the direction of the toddler and gave the child the beads. Now, the child didn't imitate what the adult did. He knew exactly what to do. He put the beads right in the cup. Wow. And what he was doing was kind of analyzing, what is this adult trying to do? And figuring out what the adult's intentions were, he knew exactly what to do. Put the beads right in the cup, and probably had some thoughts about how incompetent that adult was.
So it requires a lot of sort of observation and also sort of wondering, what is it that this baby is showing me in the learning, yeah?
That's exactly right, because oftentimes the ways that babies are responding to situations aren't the ways that we expect. It doesn't mean that the ways they're responding are wrong or irrational or incomprehensible. It means we've got to put on our thinking caps and figure out, so what's going on in that child's experience? And when we can sensitively observe and patiently reflect, then we're ready to respond appropriately.
From your perspective, what are the most exciting developments that are coming out of the research about infants and toddlers right now?
Well, I think there are really three things that are changing our understanding of very young children. The first thing, and I think in some respects the most important one, is that they're not egocentric. We used to think that was so, but we know now that very young children are extraordinarily socially perceptive. The second thing that is important is that they're developing self-regulatory skill. They're learning to manage their own impulses and their behavior, but they're at the beginning of a very, very long road. And so we have to be careful about what we expect of them. And I think the third thing we're learning is how significantly stressful experiences can impact these children. Not just in their emotional responding, but sometimes also in their thinking and their ability to learn.
Well, and as you share those, I mean, they all have real implications for the kind of work that folks are doing in early Head Start and child care programs. So I wonder if we can go through them and talk a little bit more about them. So you talked about how infants are not as egocentric as we might have at one time thought. What does that mean?
Well, we used to believe that infants and toddlers and young children were wrapped up in their own worlds, that they saw the world only from their own perspective, only from the point of view of their own goals and intentions and feelings, and had trouble understanding how other people could see or experience the world differently from themselves. What we now understand is that in contrast, very young children are socially sensitive, emotionally aware, and very tuned into other people's experiences. Let me give you an example. It's another experiment with 18-month-olds. In this case, the child is sitting at mother's lap across the table from an adult experimenter. And in between them are two bowls of food, a bowl of broccoli and a bowl of goldfish crackers. Now, we both know what kind of food most toddlers like. But they're both sampling the food, and the toddler is only eating the goldfish crackers, of course, but the adult is sampling both the broccoli and the goldfish crackers and responding in a very surprising way. Every time they eat the broccoli, they're showing they really like it and they think it's just great. And every time they eat the goldfish crackers, they're going, yuck, I hate goldfish crackers. Now the crucial moment occurs. The adult puts her hand right in between the two bowls and says to the child, I want some more. Give me some more of what I want. Now, if the child were responding egocentrically, they would put the goldfish crackers in the experimenter's hand. But what the children in this study did was they put the bits of broccoli there. Now, sometimes they did that with an expression of, well, if that's what you want, fine for you. But what it showed was that they were responding in a very non-egocentric way. They were reading the adult's emotional reactions to the food. From that, they were deriving an understanding of what the adult wanted, and they were responding appropriately. And that's very non-egocentric.
It's extraordinary, right?
Well, it's not only helping us understand children better, but it enables us now to help them derive that social and emotional understanding that they're seeking. We can help them understand why another child is feeling the way that they're doing, and we can put labels to those emotions, and we can help them explain and begin to predict how another child is going to react to a situation. We can help them understand their own feelings and how to interact with a child who may want the same thing that they want. So there's a lot that we can do as adults to help this non-egocentric child learn about the social world that they desperately want to understand better.
Lots of opportunity for staff there, for sure. So let's move on to that second point that you had, which is on self-regulation. Can you talk to us a little bit about what self-regulation is, what you mean by that, and sort of how it develops then in kids?
So we think of self-regulation as the developing ability to be able to manage one's own behavior, one's impulses, one's emotion, but also one's thinking and one's attention. And one of the things that the developmental brain research has shown us is that this story, this pathway, takes a very long time. Self-regulation begins to develop in certain brain areas as early as 1 year of age, but it continues to develop all the way through early adulthood. So it means that the children in our care in early Head Start are only taking their first baby steps in the development of self-regulation. And that means two things. We have to be very careful about what we expect of them to make sure that it's within their abilities. And we also know that we can provide them with a lot of help and support to enable them to regulate themselves as well as they're capable of at their age.
Let's take a look at some video that can help us sort of track a little bit both what staff can do and the development that occurs in self-regulation. This is a very quick clip, Ross, of a very young infant, and I hope that you can look at this and tell us a little bit about what you see here.
Hey, bud, we're outside. Bird away. Bird away. No, we don't.
So this is a good example of the kind of self-regulation we might expect to see in a young infant. And if you didn't pay attention, you would not have noticed the fact that this is a child who was sucking on the bottle, having lunch, but he also got distracted. He got distracted by the camera person, and he was able to manage his own attention enough to turn back to the bottle and continue his meal. He was doing so, however, in the enveloping care of an adult. So the child was able to do that because there was an adult there who is providing secure and consistent support for him. And I think that's a really good example of what self-regulation looks like at this age. Very simple, not complex, not sophisticated, and assisted by the supportive care of an adult.
Wonderful. So we have a longer clip now from a home visiting program. This is a mobile infant who is just, I have to say, has just woken up from a nap that was much too short for her.
Esa es la gallina. ¿Y los pollitos? ¿Los pollitos? ¿Dónde están los pollitos? Pío, pío, pío. ¿Qué? ¿El qué? ¿No quieres eso? Ok. ¿No? ¿Dónde están los pío, pío? ¿Qué? ¿Se perdió? Ah, ya sé, ya los encontré. Mira dónde están. Mira los pollitos. Piu, 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 piu. Piu, 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 piu. Piu, 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 piu.
¿Pollitos?
¿Tienes sueño?
¿Ya te estás chupando el dedo?
No.
So what did you see here from this mobile infant, and also what did you see here from this very skilled mom?
So this is a good example of self-regulation for all of its multiple influences. This child has not had enough of a nap. She's slowly waking up. And one thing we might assume, which is true in this case, is that this child's self-regulation is not going to be optimal. And you could see that in the way that she fussed a little bit in the middle of the story reading. But one of the things that is remarkable is the way in which the adult responds and acknowledges the child's distress when it occurs, but manages to re-engage her back in the story reading such that the child becomes involved in the story again. The thumb in the mouth, of course, was another effort to self-regulate at the end, and the mother accepted that and nurtured her back into her lap. So it was a wonderful example of sort of the back and forth that self-regulation involves at this age, involving a child who's capable of more than the earlier child was.
It's amazing, really, the complexity of all that's happening in that moment with this little girl.
Well, especially so because we often don't take that into account when we're working with kids, and it's easy, it's very easy for any caregiver to become frustrated that children are not more self-regulating, more emotionally in control, that they're less fussy, that they're able to follow instructions readily. And oftentimes those are not things that children of this age are capable of doing on their own. We've got to create an environment that enables them to manage their behaviors as well as they possibly can.
Nice. We have one final video here. It's another short one, but it's a 3-year-old. He's just barely turned 3. And I wanted to show it to you because I think it gives us a nice contrast to that first clip that we saw. So there he goes riding off. So what do you see in this little boy here that in terms of self-regulation?
So this is a nice capstone to this developmental sequence we've been looking at because here is a child who is willing to boldly go off where no toddler has gone before. And he's showing all the confidence of a child who has the security of knowing that if I need help, if I get in trouble, there'll be somebody there who'll take care of me. This is what we seek, a child who has the self-confidence that the support of others provides. And of course, he's going far off, and that's reflecting some degree of self-confidence, but also self-regulation.
Fantastic. A lot to think about in terms of self-regulation. Let's go to that third point that you had, which is that stress can really impact infants and toddlers. And I wonder if you'd say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think one of the things that we have learned is that children who are under stress, and stress in children's lives can come from lots and lots of different places. But when they're experiencing stress in their lives, they bring it with them to early Head Start, and it affects their behavior. And it affects their behavior in ways that we sometimes don't expect. So we would expect that a child who's under stress would show greater emotionality, and they might be a little bit more on edge. But what we also know is that stress undermines their self-regulation. It makes it harder for them to focus their attention. It makes it harder for them to follow instructions. It makes it more difficult for them to cooperate. And indeed, it impairs brain areas having to do with their ability to learn and remember what they're learning. Understanding those effects helps us understand that sometimes children who are experiencing difficulty elsewhere in their lives are not being intentionally defiant. They're not striving to be uncooperative. They're not trying to fail to pay attention. It's that their brains are so preoccupied with what's going on elsewhere in their lives that it's having all these effects. The other story of stress is that there's a lot that we as caregivers can do to help them cope with the kinds of stresses they experience in their lives. So if we provide a setting for them that is child-centered, that is supportive, that is predictable, in which we can help them through the transitions that are often difficult for children in their early years of life, we can provide them a safe place in which they can be able to cope more successfully and have good experiences, whatever else is going on in their lives.
Well, and I think it speaks, as you're describing that, Ross, it speaks to the staff role in this program, that there's really, and it's not just the center-based staff, of course, but also home visitors have an opportunity here to support families in creating those kinds of environments, and it really is both a story of vulnerability, again, and opportunity.
That's exactly right.
Very exciting. So we're going to turn now just to a question that came in from a new teacher working with a new baby.
I'm working with a new baby. She's 2 months old. I know she's new to the center, but she cries all the time. I feel like she's taking all of my attention.
And we have a couple of responses from seasoned folks in the field. The first one is from a teacher.
Baby cry to communicate. Oh, make sure the baby is not hungry. Diaper is clean. Definitely communicate with the parents. Make sure if they have something special to use at home, like a pacifier. I will ask a permission from the parents so I can use it in the classroom to soothe that baby. And you need to remember, babies are crying for the first week or 10 days in the new place, so they can feel safe until they feel safe and adjust to the new environment.
And we have one more response from LaToya. Let's hear from her.
Well, the first thing you can do is actually talk with the parents and see what do they do at home to soothe the baby. Sometimes the same routines that they do at home can help you while you're at school. Usually breastfed babies specifically have a hard time adjusting to new environments, so sometimes having something from home, from mom, just that sense of smell can help. And even if that doesn't work, you can also look for outside resources on websites or even ask seasoned teachers for help, though they can sometimes help with that kind of situation. But when all else fails, just remember to be patient and use loving and calm tones, and that can go a long way in the meantime.
Lots of strategies from those particular caregivers. So is there anything you would add or anything that you would say about that?
Well, I think those are excellent responses. And what I would do is simply illustrate how much they are showing the qualities of highly effective care for children of this age. The first response emphasized a lot of the importance of observation and reflecting on what you're observing in the child and information gathering. And the second one was talking about the ways of trying different kinds of strategies to see what would work. Keeping in mind that a young child can be fussy for lots of different reasons means that we have to think carefully and try to understand what the child's experience is in order to figure out why this is happening and how we can be most helpful.
So Ross, we have a last question from a new home visitor. Let's hear what she's asking here.
I know that a lot of kids have a lot of stress in their lives, and the first 3 years are very important. Can I really help them in 90 minutes?
Wow, so that's a big question. What would you say to that, Ross?
One of the things that we can't do oftentimes is completely change the sources of stress, but we can provide a safe haven for children, or as a home visitor, we can help that adult figure out how they can be a safe haven and a secure base for a child experiencing stress. And sometimes this may involve exploring with the adult what kinds of things are affecting that child and the ways in which they can assist the child in coping. I think one of the things the research has shown us is that it's adults and adult relationships with children that help to buffer stress for children, and that's one of the ways we can help children cope more effectively.
I really want to thank everyone for the questions that they sent in today, and I really want to thank those caregivers and staff for sending in those strategies and tips for us. And finally, Ross, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. I think what Ross shared today is not just about opportunities for babies, but opportunities for all of us who work with the youngest children. What potential you have to make a difference for children and families in the first 3 years.